Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
If you can hear me.
Hi, John.
Hi. My video is not allowing me to switch on, please. But I'm going. Oh, there we go.
There you go, John. Yeah.
I think we're ready to go. So I need the slides back. Well, good evening, everybody who's listening in and watching in. We're about to start this meeting. I'm Councillor John Neal, and I'm the chair for the meeting tonight. Now, I'd like you to just see the second slide on here, which is about how we run the meeting on the Zoom. Here we go. So just outline some key points. This is a 90-minute meeting, 6:30 till 8 p.m, although we could go on a little bit longer if we need to. You will be able to see the panelists as you can at the moment on the screen, I think. But when we've got slides up as well, then the slides take the dominance of the screen and the panelists are in a small window by the side. If you want to ask questions at the appropriate time, we'll invite you to join in the discussion when the time is right. Please raise your hand. And on Zoom, if you're not familiar with that, there's a raised hand button at the bottom of your screen, usually, or you might find a raised hand option on your participants window. You can also post questions in the question and answer window, but we won't be monitoring questions in the chat window, which you might not have access to anyway. Please keep questions and comments brief if you would, otherwise it gets a bit difficult. And when you're not speaking, please keep your microphones muted so that we don't hear background noises at home. We will respond to any questions as much as we can during the meeting, but if anything's not covered, we'll try to get back to you afterwards by email. Okay, so there's a few pointers to how we're going to do the meeting, and I'll just give some introductions now. So for anyone who hasn't been to one of these meetings before, this is your opportunity to hear about progress on the Farnham infrastructure programme and to put questions to the panel. The infrastructure programme is the major project being run by the 3 councils for Farnham to improve the highway infrastructure in the town centre and in the neighbourhood areas, and also on the major road network around the town. So I'm going to start by just introducing the panel members who are on the screen at the moment, and I'll outline how we're going to cover the meeting tonight as well. And as soon as I say that, the names disappear from the screen. But never mind about that. So alongside myself, I have Andy McLeod, who is the joint chair of these local liaison forums. Andy and I are here to answer questions tonight. However, most of the questions will be covered by other members of the panel who represent the technical and the project management team. This is the first local liaison forum we've had since March. So there have been quite a lot of developments over the summer period. And along with that, there have been some changes to the programme team. So the first person I would like to introduce and welcome to the project is Elaine Martin. She's from Surrey County Council and is now the overall programme manager for the programme. Also from SCC, we have Katie Sargent. Now, she's not directly involved with the project, but she's joining us tonight to outline the wider context of climate change and other aspects that relate to the programme. Thank you for joining us, Katie. Chris Greenwood is now the technical lead from Atkins. Welcome, Chris. And Chris will give you the technical update to the programme as we go through. But I think he's also going to be joined by Alex Kai, who's also from Atkins, and I think he's going to be with us as well. And also on the panel is Peter Birch, who's been with the programme from the beginning, looking after the day-to-day project management. So pleased to see you as always, Peter. On to the agenda. Now, the first item we're going to cover is what's called climate change context. And this is, you'll be aware that there are increasing concerns about climate change, not only within the three councils where we've all declared a climate emergency, but also at the national and international level, and coming up very soon, the COP26 conference in Glasgow. In response to this, Surrey County Council is updating its policies to do with infrastructure and transport. There's a big programme going on there in SCC. Katie's going to outline what is happening here and briefly tell you how all that has an impact on our infrastructure programme. The next item on the agenda is called the Optimised Infrastructure Plan. This is the key policy plan and accompanying publication that defines the intentions of the programme. The document was published in draft form earlier in the year, and the team will be updating you on how that has evolved in the meantime to reach a final version that is about to be published. Whilst it is named a final version, the plans will of course develop further as the programme progresses. And the next item on the agenda is called short and medium interventions. That's the name that we now give to the earlier changes that we expect to come through on the ground in the next year or two. We used to call this quick wins when we were talking about the more immediate changes, but it's now been extended to cover the longer period going forward. So we now have a combination of short-term and medium-term interventions, which we will talk about tonight. We're going to take pauses between these updates so that you can ask questions on each topic as we cover it. Projects 2, 3, and 4 are the specific projects within the overall programme, and we shall take each of these in turn. Finally, there will be an opportunity for any further questions, and my colleague Andy will close the meeting with some closing remarks. We are aiming to finish around 8 o'clock, as I said, but time is a little bit flexible depending on how we get on. So I would now like to hand over to Katie Sargent to give you the climate change context. Thank you, Katie.
Hello, everyone. Can I just check that you can hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, John. So I'm Katie Sargent, and I'm the Greener Futures Group Manager at Surrey County Council. I've been invited along just to do a brief, to give a brief bit of context about climate change and the position that Surrey County Council, in partnership with other local authorities in the area, is taking, but also to talk to you about quite an interesting and exciting event opportunity that we have coming up early next month. So it's quite timely that I'm speaking to you now, as yesterday there was a flurry of activity from government, and they released several quite key policies around climate change and carbon reduction, including their long-awaited UK net zero carbon strategy, which sets out how the country as a whole will achieve net zero carbon by 2050. And this is quite a key focus of the work that my team in Surrey are doing at the moment, looking at how we achieve the same target for the county, which is incredibly challenging. And just to put things into context, we're talking about 46% of the county's carbon emissions come from transport. So it's by far our biggest sector of carbon, and therefore really relevant to some of the plans and proposals that will be taking place in Farnham. So government are setting out the pathway to net zero carbon, and Surrey are doing the same at the county level, working closely with local authority partners, so including Waverley and Farnham. So, I mean, what that means in reality is that by 2050, we need to have completely got ourselves out of petrol and diesel cars. We need to be heating and powering our homes using renewable energy sources or low emission sources. We need to also make changes to our lifestyles, but that obviously takes, will take a number of years to come in. We need to be putting in place the infrastructure to enable us to make those changes now. And that's really, quite apparent when you consider the fact that government are putting in a ban on the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030, and therefore we need to have electric vehicle infrastructure throughout the country to enable people to make those switches. So it's quite an interesting time, and there's going to be a huge amount of investment that needs to come in to enable us to do that, which brings with it opportunities for job creation and growth and creating a green economy, which is obviously really exciting. So that's obviously going to be seen at a national level, but also really locally. So the changes in terms of, cycle paths, EV infrastructure, changes to the way we heat our homes, and government grant funding that will become available. So there's a lot of work for us to do to make sure that those messages are really clearly given to residents so that they know what they need to do, what helps at hand, and what support and funding is available. But I'm just going to finish by talking about the Climate Change Conference, which, as most people will know, is happening next month in Glasgow. So this is COP26, which is the UN Climate Change Conference that happens every year. And it's being hosted in Glasgow, which is very exciting for us as a country. And government are very keen that this is not just something that's happening up in Scotland, but that there's activity that's happening all over the country. And so they've made funding available for local authorities to run events during COP. And Surrey, in partnership with key partners, bid for some funding to run an event and was successful. So on the 10th of November, we will be running an event which will be based in Farnham, which will be focused on decarbonising transport. And it will be a community celebration of everything that's happening in Surrey to encourage more sustainable travel. And we will be doing lots of things during that day. We'll be focused on a sort of a community event in Upper Hart Car Park, which will be closed for the day. There'll be an air pollution and sustainable transport exhibition at the University of Creative Arts. We'll have local schools visiting. We're hoping to have a parklet on Castle Street, which sort of demonstrates other uses of parking spaces, so some nice seating and some entertainment. So just a small parklet. We're also organising an electric vehicle bike race, and so there'll be a whole range of activities that'll be happening that day. The event's going to be filmed and it will be live streamed onto a COP26 website, along with other events happening all around the country, and potentially also shown at the conference. So this is quite a high profile event of sort of local activity and celebration of sustainable travel. There'll be more information about this. It's been organised extremely quickly. Government haven't given us a huge amount of notice, but we will start to promote this. So you'll start hearing more about this and opportunities to get involved. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to tell you that it was happening. And I think that was everything I wanted to cover, John. So I'll hand the virtual mic back to you.
Thank you very much, Katie, for that interesting background. And I think we're all going to look forward to this event in Farnham on the beginning of November. Okay, do we have any questions for Katie before we carry on? I should be looking for hands up. I can't see any hands up.
There is a question in the Q&A, John.
In the Q&A?
Yeah.
Ah.
From Jack Slim.
Jack Slim. Would Jack Slim like to make his question himself?
You don't have to bring him on to the system, John. You want me to read it out, actually? Well, yes.
So he's being added now, Andy.
Okay, fine.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Jack. Thank you.
Right, I mean, I do hope, I'm not a climate change denier by any thing. It's almost inevitable. I hope this greenwash thing is not a pretext for stopping any work on the Recursion bypass, or it's a way of getting out of all the road building that's necessary for Farnham to have a good transport system. So my question is, you won't use this as some cynical pretext for stopping part of this infrastructure work?
Okay, Jack. Well, this is not affecting what we're doing on Recursion bypass. The engineers are looking at that at the moment, and I think they'll update you later on that particular project. Does anyone else want to come in there? Okay, I don't see any more questions. Am I right? Shall we carry on? If we're ready, we can carry on to, I think it's probably going to be Chris.
Chris, are you updating or me?
It's Elaine, I think. It's Elaine.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Good afternoon, sorry. So we've had some changes to the OIP following feedback. They include policy additions and changes since the draft was issued, removal, alterations and additions to some of the potential schemes, text and mapping alterations, along with some additional information on potential carbon impacts. The final OIP will be released this month and will be published on the programme's web pages. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. That's quite a brief introduction there. Would anyone like to ask questions about the infrastructure plan?
Actually, John, if I can mention, there's a further question from Tim Stanley that relates to the previous event item, but we should probably answer it.
Yes, let's read out Tim's question. I trust the event, well, this is the COP26 event in Farnham, not impact traffic on Castle Street. Katie, do you want to make a comment on that?
I think, unfortunately, Katie couldn't stay, John, so somebody else will have to answer that one.
As far as I'm aware, we're not intending to close Castle Street. Castle Street will be open to traffic.
Yeah.
And the event will be on the side.
Yeah, I think that's correct with what Katie said, John.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions there? I can't see any more questions at the moment. In which case, let's go on to the next slide, which is moving on to Project 1, short and medium term interventions.
Okay, just as an kind of introduction, the HGV measures are designed to stop vehicles weighing more than 7.5 tonnes from diverting through the north of Farnham and the town centre, and to keep them on the A31 instead. The traffic regulation order went live on the 4th of October, and the HGV restrictions are now in place on Upper Hell Road, Folly Hill, Castle Street and Odeon Road. However, although the majority of the signs are now in place, the solar, also called Zeta signs, and some other electrical works are required, and these are being completed this week, if not today. With regards to the wayfinding strategy, this project is a system of pedestrian-focused products that connect pedestrian arrival points to end destinations, providing a consistent navigational network, including to the new developments in town. Changes will include new and improved finger post and totems. The totems have the information and locational mapping to help people navigate around Farnham. Phase 1 strategy report was circulated to our partners, Waverley Borough Council and Farnham Town Council, and all the feedback is now being considered. We are now on the second phase of the project, which will be the placement strategy and the design of the finger posts and the totems' look and content. 20-mile-an-hour zones and speed restrictions. In response to problems raised by councillors and members of the public, a study was undertaken in December 2020 to understand the issues caused by speeding vehicles in Farnham and the surrounding areas, and to identify how they might be addressed. Speed limit assessments were carried out on a number of roads, and as a result of these assessments, it was proposed that the existing 30-mile-an-hour speed limit be reduced to 20 in and around Farnham Town Centre, Waden Lane and Upper Hell Road. The preliminary design and stage 1 safety audit of the project has been carried out, and on the 3rd of September, we took a 20-mile-an-hour proposal to the Waverley Local Committee. It was accepted that we could proceed to statutory consultation, noting that further engagement on the heritage element in relation to the measures in Castle Street and a possible extension to the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit for Upper Hell Road. We are currently preparing the traffic regulation order consultation documents, which are planned to go live next month. Road reclassification. At the Farnham board meeting in January, members requested that reclassification of the A325 through Farnham between Shepherd and Flock and the Cotsbridge roundabouts. This required patching over the A325 with blank white reflective signing material and white road demarcation to be removed at specific locations. Additionally, signs in Downing Street and the Borough are also be required on the A325 to be bracketed. To date, the majority of changes to signage on the roads have now been made, which happened at the same time as the HGV signage to save costs, and the sign changes are proposed to be completed next week. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to just go back to a couple of questions here and then perhaps move on, if that's all right. Can we just take a question from Peter Goodman? Peter Goodman, do you want to come in?
Hi, yes. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to know whether the OIP is going to include a cycle network. And from what you're showing on the screen, it suggests that it might do. Can you just confirm that this will be in the OIP?
Elaine, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I can pass over to my Atkins colleague, Chris Greenwood.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Peter. So the OIP included some initial routes for walking and cycling, but we're now embarking on the next stage, developing the LC WIP, which I'm not sure if everybody knows what that is, a local cycling and walking implementation or infrastructure plan. So that will certainly have a network of cycle routes, and we'll begin to look at the feasibility of those. So it's just basically continuing on from the OIP, looking at walking and cycling network in more detail.
Okay, thank you. So when do you forecast that the LC WIP for Farnham will be complete?
I haven't got that to hand, Peter, but I would suggest in a couple of months. But
Okay.
we can get a more firm answer than that perhaps afterwards. But yeah, in a matter of months.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Let's move on. Tim Clark, I think you have a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, good. Please excuse me, mistyping COP. I've been walking around trying to get onto the meeting, and finally I did. And then I started to press the wrong buttons. You had presumably an introduction session on the COP response in Farnham. Is that true? Because I missed that first presentation. Is that correct?
There was just a very brief outline of the climate change aspects on this programme, and Katie Sargent from SCC talked a little bit about a COP event that we're running in Farnham.
Well, brilliant. And that's what I gathered retrospectively. I just wanted to say that I think Farnham is a chance to provide an exemplary situation for the country to look at, in a way that we're sort of tied up with all of our roads and problems. We're struggling to get out of them without sort of polluting the environment and without compromising the use of the town by drivers. And I think it's commendable that we're dealing with the HGV problem. There was a comment earlier on somewhere else by somebody who asked about the Western Bypass. I did see a red line on that OIP. I'm not sure whether that was the Western Bypass or not, but there's always a an environmental impact to these road schemes, and I've been reminded of that many times when we've had discussions on it. How are we addressing that in relation to the advantages that the road schemes would bring in terms of pollution and quality of life? Is somebody looking at that particular sort of balance between spending and carbon footprinting, and then getting a kickback in terms of health and environment?
Tim, they definitely are looking at the environmental issues. Elaine, Chris, would you like to give an answer here?
Chris?
Well, I think as you've indicated, all the proposals that we were looking at is all about balance between the pros and cons. So we definitely are looking at all possible benefits and impacts of all proposals on a range of issues: transportation, environment, economy, all of those things.
Thank you. There's a question here from Chris Butler about how is the 20-mile-an-hour zone going to be enforced? Please.
I think Alex Pye will answer that one.
Hi, evening all. There's a number of measures that we're looking at for the 20-mile-an-hour speed reductions. Firstly, some of the engineering physical measures to reduce speed. So things like build outs to give the engineering measures required to slow people down. But with regards to enforcement, there will be some engagement from the police if there are issues raised, but obviously cognizant of the fact that their resources are limited. So we will be setting up a speed watch scheme that will run in parallel, similar manner to the HGV watch, that we can gather data on incidents and flag that to the police as and when appropriate.
Thank you, Alex. I hope that answers the question. I've got a question here from Mark Mulberry, who is getting confused by our abbreviations. I suspect the one he's thinking about is LC WHIP. So I think we need to just be careful to make sure we spell these out. Another question from Barbara Rogers. Barbara Rogers, would you like to put your question?
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Although the HGV rerouting went live on the 4th of October, and I know there are many signs, there are still a significant number of HGVs coming up Castle Treat and through the town centre. Some are repeat offenders, and others maybe are just from a distance. But until we have some enforcement of this, then I suspect it's going to continue. I don't think many of these vehicles are loading or unloading in the town, and they will just continue to do this until they are stopped, really. So how are we going to move forward with this?
Okay. I think the general answer is that we have to, we put these measures in place, and a large percentage of the hauliers do take notice of them. In fact, I believe the team have been speaking to hauliers, the main ones that go through the town, and they are getting some cooperation from them. So we do expect to see self-enforcement of what is going on, and we'll have to take a view later on, I expect, as to how effective that is and if anything else needs to be done. Catherine, did you like to come in here?
Yes, Barbara, we've set up a community HGV watch in North Farnham, and we're starting to do some monitoring of the HGVs that are coming up and down at the junction of Folly Hill and Upper Hale Road, because obviously that covers Castle Street as well. Yeah. And the community group up here are starting to write letters to the various companies that are not currently abiding by the HGV ban. Surrey County Council are appointing an HGV watch coordinator. They won't be in post until November, but as and when they do come online, that same set of data can then go to that individual and they will write to the companies. If you are interested in getting involved in the HGV Watch, you can drop me a note to my Surrey email address and I will link you in with the person in the community group who's coordinating that if you would like to participate, or anyone else. Hope that helps.
There's a question from Pamela Pownall, and she put that question to me this afternoon. I'm going to just say it out loud here. She has noticed that if you come through West Street towards Castle Street, they have recently erected a blue one-way sign which suggests that traffic should not turn left into Castle Street. Can one of the team try and answer what is happening there? It looks as if it's not quite right. Chris.
I can answer. Yeah, it's not something that comes under my brief, but I'll answer because of I know which sign you're referring to. So I think the sign it's a white arrow on a blue background. It looks like it's pointing traffic to go straight ahead. So that's your sign for a one-way street. So obviously it's there because the borough is one way at that point. I kind of take the point. It's not the best location because you could look at that and think you can only go straight ahead when it's at the point at which you can actually turn left into Castle Street. But it is actually the kind of right sign to signify that the borough is obviously a one-way street at that point. That's why it's there. I'm not sure, but I think that sign's been there for a while. But I gather, was it Pamela? Pamela thinks it's been only recently been erected, but
yes, I'm not sure myself. She does assure me, by the way, whether this is good news or bad, that people are not taking much notice of it. They're still turning left. So it's not.
Well, they obviously you're allowed to turn left, and the sign is to indicate that the borough is one way. But in travelling that way, you can obviously still permitted to turn left into. It's not intended to indicate that you can't turn left, basically.
Chris, it's been in situ since about 2009, so it's been there quite a long time.
Oh, has it? Okay. Right. I think we should move on. What's the next slide? Is probably with Chris, I think.
I think it's generally Elaine, John, although obviously I'm here
to Elaine.
Support and answer queries and so on.
Okay, so this is some mapping that we've started to develop for the medium-term interventions and their locations. So as you can see, it's quite spread all over Farnham. And this project is the development and implementation of a series of interventions in and around Farnham based on stakeholder suggestions. So it's quite a list. And since we last met, the team have compiled a potential interventions list based upon stakeholder suggestions and feedback. We've developed and agreed with the partners a first sift-in methodology, which aligned with the overall programme vision and OIP objectives. We've also carried out a stage 2 sift, which further prioritised the list, taking account of funding requirements, deliverability, environmental impact, carbon impact, consultation requirements, the potential for modal shift, digital technology, health and safety, and the impact on local businesses. We've also developed this GIS mapping system, which looks at the whole area and the location of the projects, along with how they interface with the programme and how it be phased. We are looking to have this as an interactive mapping system on the programme webpage very soon. So the next steps for the project are to develop packages for these schemes, look at funding opportunities outside of the main capital allocation, which will allow further projects to come forward, and develop the funding, design and delivery programme. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Elaine. One of the attendees has asked where the key to this diagram is. I know it's on the next slide, but we will be publishing these slides, so you'll be able to look at them in more detail after the meeting. Obviously, there's a lot to assimilate here.
Like I say, it will be an interactive map, which will be on the programme's web pages.
Yeah. And I've got a couple of questions which are in the chat box. Would you please put the questions on the Q&A box if you would? It makes it a bit easier for us to follow them. And there was one of those questions is from Neil Farnham Smith, talking about connectivity on the A31. So I think we'll come to that one, Neil, later on when they talk about that project, if you would. And there's a question also from Michelle Quinlan on the chat box. Shall I just read that out? Maybe someone can come up with that. I trust that the 20-mile-an-hour zone build-outs and signage will be treated with respect for the historic heart of Farnham. Also, without strong enforcement, 20 miles an hour will simply be ignored. If WBC can afford a traffic warden, they can afford the appropriate speed cameras. So the answer there, Michelle, is that there is consultation going on about the 20-mile-an-hour proposals at the moment. And we are listening, and the team are listening to questions like you're posing there at this point in time. And I think we also respect the points you've made about the heritage and the sign and the build out. So we are looking at those. Okay. What else have we got? Tim Stanley, has access to parking been considered for all areas? Access from the north is very poor currently. So Elaine, could you just come to that? Cars coming in from the north and access to car parks.
Yeah, that will be considered as part of any schemes that we're coming through. That would probably come as part of the town centre project, which is project 3. Yeah, project 2, sorry. Chris might be able to come in on that a little bit more detail.
Well, I think you're right, Elaine. It's wrapped up in the town centre project, and with anything we're looking at, we clearly need to understand, make sure people can get to and from each of the car parks in the town centre. So that's part of evaluating the various options.
Okay, thank you. I think we can move on. That's right.
Okay, do you want me to start? So project 2, the town centre project. This is looking at the development of course, walking and cycling routes beyond those included in the optimised infrastructure plan, also called the LCWIP, which actually stands for Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. We're now considering the options for pavement widening and vehicle movement within the town, and we're addressing the phasing of the interventions in line with available funding and opportunities. We have also got to ensure, though, that there's a cohesive link between the other projects and especially project 3, the Farnham A31 corridor. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to go to the next slide, or if anyone wants to ask a question at this point, I suggest we go on to that one.
Sorry, John, if I can just mention that Pete Goodman still says he's waiting for an answer to a question about wayfinding and so on.
There is.
If this is the right time to pick that up.
Okay, let's do that. Peter Goodman, I'll read out your question. So if the wayfinding project does not include cycle signage, when will the 2 existing shared cycle paths receive some signage? Tim Oliver has confirmed in writing that this will be included in the short and medium-term interventions. Elaine, could you just cover
that? Yes, thank you. We have been notified of that, and they will be hopefully included in either the LC WIP work or on the medium-term interventions.
Okay, thank you. I know Peter is anxious to see all this put in place, as we all are. So we can only say to Peter, please be patient with us. We're moving as fast as we can. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Jack Slim, what happened to the notion of depots for HGVs to drop off goods to be carried to the shops? I think that's going to be coming up somewhere. You can either take it as a question now or come back to it.
Yes, I'm quite happy to answer it. I'm sure Chris will. This will be something we're looking at as part of the town centre project. Chris, I don't know if you want to talk in any more detail about that.
Well, I agree, and as we see, this is on screen at the moment. I think this plan's taken from the optimised infrastructure plan report, which indicates the kind of key components of the town centre, which, along with proposals for walking and cycling and placemaking, as you can see, includes freight consolidation and delivery distribution points. So it's all kind of integrated solution that would, yes, certainly look at freight and deliveries and how we can basically allow freight and delivery still to happen and support businesses, but hopefully reduce the number of vehicles on the town centre network at the same time.
Thank you, Chris. There's a question or two questions from Tim Stanley. Tim, would you like to pose your questions? I'm not getting an answer there, so I'm going to read Tim's question. Has access to parking been considered for all areas? Access from the north. I think we've just covered that one, haven't we?
Yeah, I think we covered that one, John.
Sorry. His second question there, pavement widening in the borough has proven to be a disaster for Castle Street traffic. Therefore, can we assume this is not to be a consideration until much later? There's an interesting one for you, Chris.
Well, you know, when you look at the town centre, you have to look at the town centre as a whole, as well as how each individual street performs. I think, obviously, we know, or we saw the impact of the social distancing measures that narrowed the borough at the time, and that reduced capacity on the borough and led to some queuing at key times. So we kind of take that feedback on board and wrap it into considering how we can bring a plan forward to the town centre that achieves obviously the best balance that we can between the needs of vehicles and the needs of people and the needs of placemaking and celebrating the heritage in the town centre as well. So yeah, the point's acknowledged.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Max Lyons has put his hand up, John, to ask a question.
Yes, I was just going to come to
Sorry,
Max.
John.
Yeah. Max, I have seen it. Max, go ahead.
There's a huge desire within the town for some pedestrianisation, and does the OIP actually include any pedestrianisation?
Thank you, Max. Chris.
Well, I think the OIP plan that was just on the screen indicated placemaking and possible reconfiguration of the traffic system to help us bring that placemaking in. I don't think the OIP has actually ruled in or ruled out pedestrianisation at the moment. It's under consideration, and as I say, at risk of repeating myself, these things are always a balance between the extent to which we want to enhance place and create room for people, and the extent to which we need to keep the town centre functioning for everybody, including vehicles. So I don't think it's been ruled in or ruled out at the moment. It's part of considering the options for the town centre.
But no, I mean, just so long as you know that that's what we really want.
Max,
I understand.
Max lives close to Castle Street, Chris, and he's very involved in Castle Street issues and has been for a long time. So it is close to his interest, I'm sure. Thank you anyway, Max, and I hope we can come back to that as the project goes forward. Tim Stanley has his hand up.
Hopefully you can hear me now. Is that possible?
Oh, yes, we can now, Tim.
Okay. Not everybody is so keen on the pedestrianisation in the centre of town. Some people do have to traverse across, and until such time there are alternative routes to be able to get across town from north to south, then pedestrianisation doesn't solve the problem. It may make it nice for people who are in the centre of town, but it doesn't necessarily help everything else. So we have to resolve the overall traffic problems, not just focus on them fixing or making the centre town a pleasant place to go walking. Sorry, just my opinion.
Thank you, Tim. You're pointing to the age-old dilemma in Farnham, which is how to improve the place, as we call it these days, and how to keep the traffic moving. The answers are not there quite at the moment, but the team are working hard and coming up with various options. So over the next few months, I think we should have a bit more clarity as what is going to be proposed. Thank you. Anything else there that I should be seeing? Michelle Quinlan, would you like to come in and ask your question? Michelle is asking if the 20-mile-an-hour zone can be extended up Castle Street further than the top of Castle Street, in other words, going past the castle. The entrance to the castle has always been a problem, and the current position of the start of the 20-mile-an-hour zone, which is the top of Castle Street, is the question that she's talking about, which has just gone off my screen. So, Michelle, did you want to come in there?
I think you said everything that I need to put across, really. But I mean, Max will back me up on this. There's always been a problem around the castle and that bend around the castle and where Max lives himself. And it seems crazy to me. We have an opportunity to extend the 20-mile-an-hour zone further north. And why aren't we considering that? Okay, well, that proposal has been put to the team recently, and they are looking at it now. I think Elaine would probably confirm that.
Yeah,
So
it
is part of the consultation. You can make that input further if you want to, and there will be a response on that coming out. Thank you, John.
Okay. Anyone else there? Can Tim Clark come in, please?
Yeah, John, thank you. Just a quick one about Max's comment. I think it's worth pointing out that Max's firm created Lion and Lamb Yard, which is a very delightful pedestrianised part of Farnham. And I think anyone who's doubting that pedestrianisation interests of people who want to have a calmer town centre means we hate cars or vehicles, I don't think that that's true. I think what we're trying to do is encourage the team to create other ways around Farnham, so that there's a minimal impact on the centre, so that places like Brightwells could be accessed by on foot from key car parks. And I think car parking is a major consideration. And I didn't hear anything about that from the team's presentation of the IOP, but I think hopefully we'll hear something more about that later. We do need to have pedestrian movement without endangering life, and I think the 20-mile-an-hour limit is very welcome throughout the town centre, and I think moving the traffic around the town will help us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Building on what you just said, there's a question from Karen Leach, which says, sorry, what is meant by placemaking? Karen, I can quickly answer that. Someone else can come in if they like. Placemaking is a fairly new term. It used to be called town planning, I think, but it's all about making a place which is good for the community and serves other purposes in terms of looking after any traffic movements and everything else. So it's all about improving the environment, making it a nicer place to be. And it's very much a key term that is used now. And it's very much part of what is coming through on the wider project plans, the transport plan that Surrey is developing as well. So it's all about, from our point of view, how can we make the town centre a nicer place to be in, to work in, and to visit. Hope that answers your question. There's a question from Hilary Roberts. Would you, Hilary Roberts, like to make her question? Here she is. Hello, Hilary. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just curious to ask what will be involved in the improvement of the proposed cycle and pedestrian route that leads through Farnham Park and to the 6 Mills roundabout. When you exit the park, there is a very narrow alley which has private property on both sides. So there's very limited capacity for cycles and pedestrians, who are often families with young children and animals. How will you separate the pedestrians from the cyclists in this very limited space?
Elaine, go ahead. Chris.
Yeah, sorry, I was interrupted at home whilst you were halfway through that, but I think it was, when we're looking at walking and cycling and the space available, we need to look at the comfort levels for both, and how, we just need to make places safe for everybody, basically. So, but looking at widths available for both walking and cycling, and whether they share or they have separate spaces, is all part of that process of the going through and developing the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan that we were talking about earlier.
Okay, and I noticed that Pamela Pownell commented that your LC WIP program, having visibility in 2 months, is a bit short because they're expecting more consultation on it. So can you just explain the process that we're going through here?
I think it'd be better if I updated on program after the meeting.
Okay.
Just to get my facts right, rather than give a wrong answer.
Okay, thank you. Peter Goodman, will the pinch points create places where car drivers race to get through before cyclists? I think he's talking about the town centre there, Chris.
Well, I suppose it's a similar answer to the one I gave in relation to the last question. Looking at the widths available for vehicles, cyclists and pedestrians and all users is pretty key when you get down to levels of detail, to make sure that everybody's as safe as they possibly can be. So that vehicles can pass safely past cyclists as they're supposed to do. So we're aware of all those issues, and that's not, we don't want to be in a position where vehicles are in a great conflict with cyclists, and that comes down to looking at the detail of the design.
Okay, thank you. I think good time to move on, shall we, to the next section?
Confidential government material.
Hilary Roberts, could you mute your microphone, please? Thank you. Right, let's carry on. We're on to slide number 16, I think. Project 3.
So if you can just move the slide for me.
Next one. Here we go.
Lovely, thank you. So this is a geographical layout of the Farnham A31 corridor. Since you last met with the team, we have since gone to the Department of Transport and discussed Just Hickley's Corner Junction, which I think was the last time we spoke. And it's now been extended to Coxbridge from the Shepherd and Flock roundabout through Hickley's Corner to the Coxbridge roundabout. So it's a corridor wide scheme now. And if we go on to the second slide, please. So the objective of the projects is to ease congestion and delays on the A31 at the key junctions, improve road safety, improve the transport network, prioritising public transport, improve walking and cycling at the Hickley's Corner junction and the connections to and from Farnham town centre, to resolve community severance by improving connectivity across Farnham and reduce the impacts of the level crossing. It's hoped to facilitate development in Farnham and improve sub-regional movement along the A31 corridor, and also addressed, obviously, as part of the OIP, air quality issues in Farnham. Next slide, please. So, as I've said before, this is the, sorry, could you just go to the next slide and go back to that one? This is an overview of the Department of Transport A31 business case with the DFT. As you can see, we're at the SOBC, which is the Strategic Outline Business Case stage. And it's here that we start developing some initial options based on engineering feasibility and spatial fit. Within the business case, we have to demonstrate that the project aligns strategically, it represents value for money, is commercially and financially viable, and is also delivered efficiently so the users can benefit more quickly. So if we go back to the previous slide, please. The current options that we're developing are the A31 Coxbridge roundabout. This will include improvements to vehicular circulation and crossing facilities for pedestrian and cyclists. The A31 Hickley's Corner and Firgrove Hill area will include improved connection for walking and cycling between the station area and Farnham town centre, and measures to provide additional capacity on the A31 along with improvements to the station approach. The A31 Shepherd and Flock roundabout will include improvements to vehicular circulation and crossing facilities to pedestrian and cyclists. So these will be the shortlisted interventions which will be presented to the Department of Transport. And essentially, if we go on to the next slide again, this is we will pass this through our partners, which is obviously Waverley Borough Council and Farnham Town Council, to check that they're happy with the submission. And it's essentially a line in the sand to say we'll be bidding. So there's no definitive options. And we're making sure that we are earmarked to have funding. And then later on, we'll be developing the outline business case. And that actually will have further developed, so be defined, and we'll have a cost benefit analysis, etc. And that will go to public consultation. We will need cabinet approval to progress at this point. So we will be meeting and we will be talking again once we are comfortable that funding has been earmarked for us, and then we'll have to put a full business case on the preferred option chosen. So each time, as you can see from this diagram, it will go to public consultation. So we won't be missing any option to discuss this further. But at the moment, this is just a line in the sand, which is just saying we potentially are bidding for this junction, and we're competing against other county councils as well for the money. Thank you.
I think, Elaine, the question on everybody's lips will be, when will they get some idea of what schemes you're thinking about here? And I think there's a question from Councillor Carol Coburn about one of your comments, which said allowing developments or proposing developments, which sounded like building things. Could you just say what you're thinking there?
Sorry, I didn't hear that bit. Proposing developments.
If you look on one of your slides, It says facilitate development in Farnham. Could you just explain that comment? It's the one before that, or the one after it.
Well, it's not just Farnham, it's all over to make sure that we're allowing for additional capacity on the network. It's not just, you know, it will allow anything to come forward and it can take the capacity. I mean, Chris can fill us in on that bit because obviously his team have been modelling this. So Chris.
Does the word development imply house building or other building, or does it mean some other form of development?
This objective, I think, on the screen is about facilitating development in the wider area and growth across the region, not just in Farnham.
Okay, thank you. Right, do we have any questions here? There's a question from Peter Goodman. Will any improvements for cyclists to Hickley's Corner be completed before Project 3? Without this, South Farnham will remain cut off from the rest of Farnham for cyclists.
So this will be considered as part of the LC WIP, which is the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. So Chris, I'm sure you can confirm that that will be looked at, hopefully to coincide at the right time. So
the early work that we did on the OIP, the Optimised Infrastructure Plan, looking at walking and cycling routes, has identified that the connection between South Farnham, the station, and essentially the town centre and the rest of Farnham to the other side of the A31 is key. So that's identified as a key route anyway. Project 3 looks to integrate improvements for that route, as Elaine has said. The further work that we're now going to do on the LC WIP will look at that route again, whether there's any short-term improvements that can be brought forward before Project 3. I do think, though, you know, dealing with Hickley's Corner is a kind of big project and really needs a kind of integrated look at that. But the LC WIP will pick it up and consider whether there's anything that can be done before the Farnham A31 corridor, particularly, as Elaine has said, that's bidding for funding. So whilst we all want funding for improvements, obviously there's a chance that you don't get the funding and we'd need to bring forward improvements anyway. So I think the broad answer is yes.
And did you give me an answer about when the public would get some visibility of what you're suggesting here?
So obviously we are submitting our business case, which will have some very high level options like what I've just talked about. And that will go to a November submission this year. There's no final, it's just these are potentially what we're thinking about with options, which I've just run through. Then early next year, we'll start, hopefully if we get awarded some funding towards it, we can start developing the outline business case. It's at that point that we will be going out to the public with some more defined options for consultation. So hopefully, looking at it, I would say roughly in the programme, sort of late 2023 is probably when we'll be going out, because it takes some time to develop these options. There's, you know, it's a big scheme, and hopefully if we can get it earlier, but it does take time to get approval through business cases. So we are in the hands of DFT, unfortunately, to see when approval or not comes forward. So we'll have to report back really at the next LLF.
Okay, well, that gives us some idea. Okay, thank you. There's a question from Julianne Flood. Would you like to make your question, Julie?
Yes, I was wondering if there's been any further plans on the designated car parks for park and stride or park and ride, sort of at the four corners of Farnham, so that drivers can park there and not use Farnham as one large roundabout to go around the town and out again. And to keep, just to keep the traffic out of Farnham. Did you hear that? Hello?
No, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about making car parks outside of town or in town.
Elaine, do you want to, or do I can
yes,
perhaps cover that?
I'm sure you can kind of cover off as well, Chris. We are working with our partners, developing park and stride kind of routes. So we've been having regular meetings, and some of these are covered off in the medium-term interventions list. I'm sure Chris can come in with a little bit more detail on those.
I think all I would say is I think partners are keen for us to move forward on the park and stride at for the Riverside car parks and the improvement to Burley's Walk. I think that's one that may come forward earlier than the others, but the others will be considered as part of the town centre work.
Thank you. As a follow-up question here from Tim Stanley. So if it's growth across the region, will that apply also to the Western Bypass, and should this be included in the A31 improvements? I think he's talking about developments in the region and their impact on the highways network.
Yeah, happy to take that one, John. Yes, future development and growth will be considered as part of the analysis work undertaken for the bypasses. There is a real risk if you conflate too many schemes into one submission that you put at risk the validity of that submission succeeding in terms of the way that DFT score things. So we won't be submitting one application for both the A31 Hickley's corridor and the bypasses. They would be considered separately, but growth would be considered as part of any of the technical work and submissions for any of those options.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. Let's take a question from Alistair Coburn, please. If not, maybe Carol Coburn would like to make a question. We can't find the Coburns.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't got this. I'm not in the same room as Alistair, so I've no idea what his question is. But I think some of you know my big fear for Hickley's, and I really want to know what your priority is for Hickley's and for the A31 corridor, because I think it's at odds with what many of us put into the neighbourhood plan, which was to green up the A31 between the two roundabouts. So I just really want to know where your priority lies. And if you see it as a regional thing, and we see it as part of our town, we're going to have a real tension there. And I just wondered what your intentions are. And by the way, Alistair says he doesn't have a question.
Okay.
I think the Elaine, I don't know if you want to answer, but the Farnham A31 corridor is considering the role of the A31, both its function locally as part of the town and things like addressing the severance of the A31 and improving the connections between the different parts of the town, but also at the same time, and I recognise that at times there is a tension with this, but the road performs a number of different roles. Its role within the region as a route, well, broadly east-west, but I know it's not exactly east-west, but you know what I mean. So it is being considered both in terms of its local context within the town, balanced against its regional function.
Okay.
So, Carol, just to come back as well, Surrey and Farnham Town Council have recently submitted a urban tree challenge bid to the Forestry Commission for additional greening in the area. So fingers crossed we'll get some additional trees in Farnham as well.
We'll definitely do that. Can I just come back on that? Because as somebody whose child was at school in Winchester and I drove up and down the 31, I can't tell you how many times, there are places all down the A31 where you go through villages and where you go through other settlements. And at each point, you have to slow down. Nobody says at that point that the A31 is a strategic route and we have to just plough through it. And I really don't see why Farnham has to be an exception there. And I'm really worried that that's what's going to happen, that Surrey is going to see it as something almost separate from Farnham. And we know how it was put there in the first place, but we don't really want to repeat that because we don't have a bypass. We actually have a bisector in the town. And the last thing we need is to make that bisection, if that's the word I'm looking for, to make that division between the north and the south even greater. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to respond? Or if not, Mark Mulberry raised a question here in response to, I think, something Chris said about, or was it Elaine, that assuming that we get the money for this project, and he says, well, if we don't get the money for this A31 project, what's plan B?
We bid again.
Bid again. Okay. There you go, Mark. Mark, Peter Goodman, do you want to come in with your question?
Yes. For the short and medium-term interventions, how much is all of this happening faster than it would have happened, say, 10 years ago? Because we've had 3 climate emergency declarations, so I was rather hoping that a lot of the work that goes on here would have been accelerated significantly. For example, whatever cycle network we put in place, Station Hill and crossing Hickley's Corner will be needed. That's a no-brainer. We can consult all we want on the LC WIP, but that route will always be needed there to join South Farnham onto the rest of Farnham. So how much quicker will we be doing things here because of the 3 climate emergency declarations?
Alex?
Did someone want me to answer that one? I think there's evidence that things are happening in Farnham because we've reported on the short-term interventions. The HGV restrictions have been delivered. The reclassification of the A325 has been delivered. We're looking at a delivery shortly, subject to the design being refined and being acceptable for the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and then coming after that hopefully would be the wayfinding system. So there's evidence of things coming forward and actively being delivered in Farnham. Clearly people have lots of different views on what is and isn't acceptable, so it's wouldn't want to bypass, to use perhaps the wrong word, the need for stakeholder and public consultation, and clearly that does take time. But I think people can see that things are happening, although I'm sure everybody would want things to happen quicker. But there are obviously constraints in terms of we do need to take the time to consult and engage with people.
Thank you. Tim Clark, did you want to just add another comment on placemaking?
Yeah, thank you, John. Just a quick one about the central car park. People are concerned generally about it being reverted to a delivery hub, and with lots of heavy goods vehicles parking up there. We do have an opportunity because of the levels to bring in a podium from sort of Goat's Head Passage level to create a sort of central shopping, pedestrian and amenity area in the central car park with whatever you want to do, or whatever we want to do with deliveries and car parking underneath. And I think generally speaking, I think we do have a challenge there to make sure that we don't skimp on spending. And I'm encouraged by Elaine's comment that we will try again to get external funding to make sure that these extra projects are possible. But don't let's forget the levels in Farnham. We do have opportunities with the levels, and we should use those also for encouraging more separation between cars and pedestrians. Thank you.
Elaine, Chris, do you want to say anything there?
I was just going to say, John, that we're not talking about bringing in additional HGVs into Central Car Park. That was never the sort of intent. The intent was more, as I popped in response to someone else's question earlier on one of the panels, that to try and remove some of the smaller goods vehicles, so vans that are at times causing congestion or safety issues on street loading facilities in the town, and create a small area within the Central Car Park. We're not talking about removing all of the car parking, but a small area where those deliveries could be consolidated, and unloading, loading can take place in a safer environment that doesn't impact on pedestrians and other people that are using the town facilities.
Yes, there can be confusion here, can't there? Because when we're talking about delivery consolidation points, we're talking about more out of town, not in the centre.
Indeed, John. Yeah, we've updated the mapping in the latest version of the OIP that will be going public shortly to create that differentiation between the two locations. You're quite right. The out of town locations are where we'd envisage those larger goods vehicles to be going, rather than in the town centre.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Jack Slim, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I just want to endorse what Carol Coburn said, that basically the last thing we want to see out of all of this is a 6-lane concrete canyon going through from the Shepperton Flock to Coxbridge, with very little connectivity between the north and south of Farnham. So, as with Peter Goodman's point, we really want to see some good engineering that makes it easy for people, traffic, and bikes and walkers to get across this, and not just not want to see it as a pretext for a major road improvement.
Yeah, fully agree.
Which I know Surrey likes, and they've always been trying to do this, seeing Farnham as the exhaust part of Surrey. But I think we would be very unhappy if that was all that was going to happen.
No, fully agree with you. None of the options that we're currently looking at seek to add a massive amount of extra lanes in that location. We're aware acutely of what we term severance, which is, as you say, the issue that the road bisects the town and makes movements north-south unpleasant, whether you're in a car, on foot, or on a bike. And one of the key objectives of all of the options we're looking at in that location is to reduce that severance. So that's firmly top of the list.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Penny Marriott, would you like to make a question? Penny is a councillor for Waverley Borough Council.
Hello. Is there any proposal to avoid the congestion that arises at the level crossing when all the trains go through by using the link road between the station and Firgrove Hill? Because I think that's one of the largest causes of congestion in the centre of town, because once the level crossing goes down, it starts backing up down South Street, and a lot of the other backs down into the centre. So if you could avoid using the road with the level crossing on by going right and then up onto Firgrove Hill, has that been looked at?
So yes, we've been looking at that particular scenario at the moment. We're also speaking with our other stakeholders, which are the rail groups, for improvements at the station area, which are currently with our property team as well. So there is a lot of discussion around how that option would align with the objectives that we're trying to achieve. So yes, Penny, we are actually covering that.
Okay, let's just take one more question, then move on to the next section, if we may. Pamela Pownell, have any discussions taken place with the rail service, both for reduced level crossing closure times and the possibility of using the station car park upper level for South Farnham car park at a cheaper rate than currently?
So yes. Yeah, just like I said, we are talking with our rail partners and discussing sort of options for improvement at station areas. So that's being done with another one of our Surrey teams to ensure that it's more sustainable. That area is used better. The car parks are improved, etc. So that is a separate scheme.
Thank you, Elaine. Shall we move on to project 4?
I can't see anything on the screen.
No, I think we're trying to do it. I don't know if you can speak about Recursion Relief Road while we're sorting that out.
So Recursion Relief Road, currently we've had some base traffic demand data being looked at. So we've had a kind of initial view of how Recursion Relief Road will affect the north and south and the town centre. And currently, due to recent changes since this originally was looked at, since there's been government changes with policy, so central and local government policies, we're actually doing a review of the Recursion bypass and how it aligns with any decarbonisation policies which are currently on the table. So that is our latest position. So we'll be reporting on that at the next LLF. And the current programme is to follow on after Project 3, which is the A31 corridor. So that is our latest position. We're actually doing a review of our policy. And obviously we've got LTP4 coming through as well. So we've got to make sure that this aligns.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions about Recursion Relief Road? I think we have already covered it to some extent. So maybe if you could give any outline on timescales of what the project's doing on this and how it might come forward.
So, like I say, we're reviewing the scheme against policy, and then we will be going out to our stakeholders and our partners to consult on our findings. So that would be by the end of this year. So we can report back at the next Farnham board or LLF, whatever. I think it's the Farnham board that comes first, isn't it, out of these?
Yep, okay. So the next meeting here will be about 3 months' time, won't it? Okay. Anything else? I can't see any questions. Oh, there are some questions. Jack Slim. Jack Slim, come in.
Hi. Yeah, I'm mystified as to why the Recursion bypass is planned to run after Project 3, the A31, except that the A31 is much more important to Surrey than the Recursion bypass. The Recursion bypass has been talked about and required for about 40 years now, and yet it's put on the back burner behind the A31 bypass. It should at least be run concurrently with the A31 improvements. And there are real people, real villagers, real problems, real deaths, real lorry overturnings where children are going to school. There are real problems with the Recursion bypass, and I can't see why this isn't up there and in front indeed of the A31 improvements.
Thank you, Jack. I think there's a reference here to a vehicle accident this week. Is that the one at the Recursion Bridge? That was up perhaps about a week ago, I think.
They're all the time. They're more or less happening, every 3 months. Yes. And oil gets spilt on the road, and then there has to be a great cleanup. Children go to school under that bridge, to Weydon School. Dog walkers have been killed by lorries mounting the pavement down the street in Recursion. The whole place is blighted for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And this has been going on for decades. And all we get from Surrey really is, oh, the A31 will improve the A31 because it benefits Surrey, but it doesn't benefit us.
I think it's to be assured that it isn't so much as coming after, it's just it has to be reviewed as part of policy at the moment, just because there's been such dramatic changes.
Okay, there's Paula Dunsmore, would you like to come in on this subject? And then I'll go to Wyatt as well. Or Wyatt, if you're ready, maybe you'd like to go ahead first.
I assume you can hear me, John?
Yes, can. Go ahead.
I'd like to endorse the serious points made by Jack Slim, most of which are made from a local perspective. But the other big thing, of course, that the Recursion bypass does is it opens up what is currently a congested area for HGVs, businessmen, who have to sit around in the middle of Recursion for at least 3/4 of an hour during rush hour in the morning and evening, to be able to go around the outside and do their jobs and their work faster. And that would benefit the economy, true of part of Hampshire and part of Surrey. So Elaine and her team need to look at all the benefits associated with the Recursion bypass, not just those for the people of Recursion, but those for the businesses of the corridor that Farnham's a part of, that the traffic that comes from Southampton going north up to places like Farnborough, or perhaps even the airport and Aldershot. We've looked at this so many times, and I, for one, don't understand why you want to do the A31 first. The A325 has deaths at stake, has significant pollution disadvantages. There are no front doors, only 10, 15 yards from the A31 bypass, but there are in the middle of Recursion, and it's meant to be a conservation area. So Elaine, please give a thought to what is actually a very quick and sensible project to do, because it's simply cutting the corner from the A325 across to the A31 to the west side of Recursion. And there's been plans for the last 40 years to do just that. It might need a bit of talk to Hampshire as well, because some of the benefits will go there. But that, as I see it, is the only sticking point. So, please.
Of course.
Paula, perhaps you'd come in as well.
Can't.
I can hear you.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was talking to myself. Sorry, hello. Thank you very much, everybody. Just wanted to know what policies, just highlight principal points of the policies that have been mooted around recently that make Surrey County Council now look at the relief road potentially more seriously or less seriously. I know, I understand, Elaine, your is an overview, but I just wondered if you could give us 1 or 2 pointers of why that's come about, which is slightly different from what we've heard previously. Thank you very much.
I'm sure some of my colleagues will jump in here, but the recent changes are away from infrastructure which isn't supported by development, and obviously it's new infrastructure. So the OIP looks to more sustainable forms of transport as well. So I'm sure Alex can come in on this element, if that's okay, Alex.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think you've highlighted one of the points around unlocking infrastructure. Another point is around the decarbonisation piece. So national policy now is obviously reflective of the fact that we've committed as a nation to a legal target to get to net zero carbon by 2050. As part of that, DfT have changed their business case requirements so that schemes need to contribute towards that reduction towards net zero. And it's not just emissions at source, by which I mean tailpipe emissions, which would obviously increase by putting in new additional road capacity. It's also the embodied carbon in actually building schemes. So concrete, for instance, is one of the biggest carbon producers globally. And therefore constructing new infrastructure has carbon both during its construction and after when it's built. So that obviously needs to be weighed up. And schemes that don't contribute towards net zero find it very, very difficult nowadays to secure funding. And obviously major road construction schemes require major money.
Okay, and Carol Coburn has added a comment here.
I'd like to speak if I may, Leader.
Oh, okay, go ahead then.
Yes, because I feel very strongly about this. I mean, if the policy is wrong, you lobby your MP and you try and get the policy changed, don't you? I mean, we have a problem in Farnham, and the problem is our air quality. It is appalling. And we also have a problem with the Recursion Bridge because people keep hitting it. And as Jack Slim said, it's a very dangerous place for the children of Weydon School to walk along. You could solve all these issues with some form of Western bypass. Elaine talks about development. How much development do you need? Have you seen what's happening in Borden? Have you seen what's happening in Farnborough? Have you seen what's happening in Farnham? Have you seen what's happening in Guildford? You know, we have got houses and development all around us. Far more. I remember being accused of exaggerating some years back when I said 20,000. I was just, you know, understating it by I can't tell you how much. And the point about this is that you could actually cure all of that with a simple Western bypass working with Hampshire. And quite frankly, if you won't tackle the government over it, I'll go and tackle them over it, because I feel so strongly that that is the only way we will ever get down to a really good quality of life in the centre of Farnham. We don't have alternative routes. That's why we've never pedestrianised. But if you have an alternative route, you can actually do it. The road draws itself. Have a look on any map. And I really think it's about time we were slightly bolder and took on the government if it's talking rubbish. Because quite frankly, it's what we need. It's what Recursion needs. It's what the town needs, the whole of the town. And that's why it would have to be a Western bypass linking with the 31, but going up to the 287, very close to where it joins the M3. And then you would have part of a national network that solves so many problems in one fell swoop. It's probably so blooming commonsensical that it'll be ignored by government, but it's worth a try. And as I say, I will do anything to get that sort of policy changed. If we're just following the money and coming up with loopy schemes or putting on hold really good schemes because it doesn't fit in with the government's tick box, then we should tell the government it's talking rubbish. I'm quite happy to do so.
Thank you. And Wyatt, would you like to add to that? Wyatt, you have a hand up.
I think we need to regard the Western bypass as quite a different case to the Recursion bypass. The Recursion bypass is justified by what's needed in Recursion for people to get around the traffic problems, indeed to overcome the air pollution problems on the A325, and the fact that you've got all that carbon being chugged out, and by the fact people are doing longer distances going through the village. You know, the village accepts that to get a Recursion bypass, we're going to have something like 2,500 homes built in the area of the floodplain and the valleys, the hills either side. The case is there. The Western bypass is a case based on the fact that it needs to alleviate traffic going through the centre of town for all the other good things to happen. Whereas before you get to the A31, which is what the Recursion bypass is needed for, it's a different case. And earlier, one of you said, look, if you lump too many things together when you put your financial application in, then it's much more easy to fall over against different measures. Now, clearly, the geography should be organised such that the Recursion bypass and the Western bypass link together. But please don't try and lump them all into one set of activity. And I understand totally the net carbon zero targets, and that's something I think the Recursion bypass contributes to, and of course the delivery of homes associated with that would also help. Hope that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Wyatt. And there's quite a few people coming in, adding comments saying they support what is being said on both the Recursion bypass and the potential Western bypass, or perhaps it should be called a Western Link Road. I don't think that's too
And
much.
could I come in actually?
Yes.
I'm aware that some members of the programme team need to leave reasonably soon, so we need to press on and try and come to a conclusion fairly soon.
Yes, we're up to the 8 o'clock and nearly at the last point, really. So if we want to move on, please, then we're on to any other business now. We've covered the main projects. So are there any other points that people want to raise at the moment?
Could I come in and make a general point, if I may, John, actually? This is almost part of my closing remarks. As usual, these LLFs have been very good discussion, a lot of interesting points made. And this is actually the 14th LLF we've had, actually. And we're now going to have them every 3 months, general updates. But the point I wanted to make, my own point, was that in terms of the A31, the A31 will become extremely important if we ever pedestrianise the town centre, because the A31 and the Upper Hill Road will become the only ways to get round the town. It won't just be a through road to Winchester, etc. If you want to get from the east to the west of the town and we fully pedestrianise the town centre, you have to use the A31. So don't forget the importance of the A31 in that sense. And that's why I say actually myself that let's not forget the value of what's been proposed in the OIP, that the OIP is proposing tremendous improvements to the town centre in terms of narrowing roads and widening pavements and reducing the traffic in Downing Street and the borough. And I'm certainly not against future pedestrianisation of the town, not at all. And that needs to be an objective. But in the short term, in my view, and it's only a personal view, it would have major disadvantages, actually, if we pedestrianised the town too quickly. People just wouldn't be able to get to the doctor's surgery, they wouldn't be able to get to Waitrose, they wouldn't be able to get to a lot of other places. And I'm putting it that strongly, just to say that, yes, I support the pedestrianisation of the town, but there's a lot of things that have to be considered. And the OIP as it currently stands brings a tremendous number of benefits, in fact, to the town centre. That's my personal view, John. I know not everybody agrees with that, and I've listened very carefully to what Max says, and he's got a very important voice, and so have many others. But I think we probably do need to try and move to a conclusion of the meeting, John. So if you can carry on now, and then I'll close the meeting.
Yeah, well, this is the point where we ask for any other questions. I don't think there's anything new coming up at the moment. Thank you for your comment there, Andy. And it's we obviously haven't quite resolved what we're going to do in the town centre yet. So I'm happy to say thank you to
There are several questions that haven't yet been answered that are there relating to interventions, costs, etc.
What on the Q&A, Ian?
Yes, on the open questions.
Yeah. If we can try and answer them fairly quickly, because I say I'm aware one or two people do need to go fairly soon, I'm afraid.
Well, if I'm looking at the Q&A box, I can see Peter Goodman, time plan for project 3. I don't know if there's any more you can say on that. Tim Stanley, I think we've covered his point on the Western Bypass, and Carol Coburn. Peter Goodman again, timescales on project 2. Michelle Quinlan agreeing with what's been said on the Western Bypass. And I now have David Howell. How receptive will the councillors and team be to changing the 20-mile-an-hour zone? Now that's any other question, I think. I think the team and the councillors are all keen to consult on the 20-mile-an-hour programme and come up with the best we can. Elaine, what would you say on that?
Yeah, we've taken on board some comments which were received at the Waverley Committee. It will be out for statutory consultation next month, and we welcome some ideas and thoughts of the proposals that we've put forward.
Thank you. Lisa White has asked if we could up the priority of the Recursion project next time we meet, but I'm sure we will give it as much priority as we can. Tim Stanley, so you make the options for the town centre viable and reduce the burden on the A31. We need to improve the routes around the town, improving the Western bypass. I think we probably covered that, so let's take that as a comment. Any other comments that people want to make at this point? If not, I'm going to wrap up the meeting, as I think I shall do. So thank you everybody for coming along. It's been a very useful discussion, and thank you for the team for helping us. And I'm just going to pass to Andy McLeod for any further closing comments.
Thanks, John. I'll keep it very brief because of time. So thanks to yourself, John, for chairing the meeting, and to the programme team, Elaine, Chris, Peter, Alex, and Katie Sargent as well, for their presentations. I think it did lead to a very interesting set of discussions, as it always does. As I said earlier, this is the 14th LLF meeting. In the future, there are going to be LLF meetings approximately every 3 months, which will come shortly after the board meetings, which are themselves every 3 months. So you can expect the next one to be in January next year. So, but that's thanks, and thanks particularly to the questioners and the people who come in to make their very interesting and valuable comments. Thanks to everybody who took part. It was another good meeting, and we'll now close the meeting and look forward to the next one in January. And I hope everybody has a good Christmas